Hey guys, welcome back. This is the MMA breakdown doing predictions for UFC Fight Night 72, Bisping versus Leites, taking place in Glasgow, Scotland. And this fight card, I don't think it's very good. Not the worst one you've ever seen, but just a lot of filler, several newcomers, which is typical for these international cards, and just not really any meaningful matchups other than the main event. A lot of guys who are never gonna, get to the top of their divisions. But the main event is important. Joseph Duffy, a good prospect, returning, and a few other guys I care about. Stevie Ray, but for the most part, a card that I'm not really excited about at all. And let's just get right into this. Follow me on Twitter, of course, link in the description at MMA Breakdown 0. Check out my other predictions. I'm doing this about a week out. Actually, there's probably not going to be any time to check out my predictions for this weekend, 189, or the Tough finale, but I'll have predictions out soon for the next event, UFC on Fox, Dillashaw versus Barao, last event in July. Alright, starting off at Bantamweight. I believe these fights are going to be on Fox Sports 1. I don't think it's a Fight Pass event. Wikipedia doesn't have that sorted out yet, but let's get right into it. At Bantamweight, Marcus Brimage versus Jimmy Rivera. Rivera, newcomer. Marcus Brimage, I was really sad to see him go down to Cody Garbrandt in his last fight. He was banging it out with him, and then I think at the start of the second round is when he got knocked out, and got knocked out pretty devastatingly. And it was sad for me to see him go out to another newcomer like that, a guy making his debut, a young fighter in the UFC. Never really got a chance to fight anyone of any real importance. I mean, other than McGregor, but never got to the top of the game, and didn't go down to a contender or a longtime vet. Just kind of topped out against another prospect who came in and overtook his spot. But Brimage is a pretty athletic, pretty powerful guy. I actually thought he was getting better before that Garbrandt fight. The fight against Juma by Akhtarzin knocked him out cold with a head kick. I thought did well in the Doan fight before that. I actually thought he won the fight, was landing some good leg kicks, but didn't let his hands go enough and got taken down several times. So Brimage, an athletic, powerful striker. I would expect him to win this just based on his UFC experience and a pretty solid fighter, in the lower ranks. But I don't know anything about Rivera, and I'm not going to be able to make a pick there. Next up at heavyweight, Daniel Omi-lanek versus Chris De La Rocha, another newcomer. This was supposed to be Omi-lanek versus Konstantin Erikin, which I thought would have been a much better fight because Erikin looked good in his debut early before dropping the decision to Victor Pesta. But Omi-lanek, not an athletic heavyweight, kind of a shorter, heavyset guy, kind of slow, has power, knocked out Nandor Guillermo in his debut, and then got out wrestled badly by Jared Rosholt in his next fight, and then in his last fight went down to Anthony Hamilton. I think he won the first round there, but again was just pressed up against the cage. Made it dangerous at times for Hamilton on the feet, but just couldn't create enough separation. Got taken down, clinched, held up against the cage, and I don't think he's really going anywhere, but does have that power to make things interesting. Again, can't make a pick. De La Rocha, newcomer. And moving on, featherweight, Robert Whiteford versus Paul Redmond, two Irish fighters. And Robert Whiteford has only had, I think, 2 fights in the UFC. Lost his debut to Jimmy Hedis, where he actually surprised me early. He won a round on Jimmy Hedis. Was looking good on the feet. I think he has kind of an orthodox stance and striking style, a bit of that karate stance. I think he's has a Taekwondo background or something. It says Judo and Muay Thai, but has kind of a different striking style. Won that first round against Hedis on the feet, looked good, but then the second round, Hedis got it to the ground and was able to submit him with a triangle off his back. And then in his next fight, which was his last fight against Daniel Pineda, won the fight and again kind of impressed me because I expected Pineda to win that fight just because he had more fights in the UFC and had finished people, but was able to beat him. Was able to outpoint him on the feet and on the ground. Stifled the submission ability of Pineda and showed some okay grappling. Doesn't really look like super talent to me. No real dominant, impressive skills, but has looked okay in both of his fights. And then Paul Redmond, apparently this guy's some huge prospect, a lot of hype around him. Looked really bad though against Mirsad Bektic. Just got taken down over and over again and pounded on. And I know apparently he cut a bunch of weight, and that was a short notice fight. But just because I didn't see anything there, and Whiteford was able to pick up some wins in the UFC, I have to go with Whiteford. But that's not going off of much at all, and I really don't know. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Redmond could get this win. Whiteford doesn't seem like he's too aggressive or really pushes a high pace. So if Redmond comes out charging him, I wouldn't be surprised if he won. And next up at light heavyweight, Ilir Latifi versus Hans Stringer. This to me is just not a fun fight. Ilir Latifi I thought had a bit of promise, but after his last loss to Jan Blachowicz, where he just ate a vicious body kick that put him down and wasn't able to get back up. I think we kind of saw him top out there. And then Hans Stringer, to me, just doesn't belong in the UFC. Barely, he beat, was it Bahoso? Francimar, beat Bahoso in his debut, which, doesn't mean anything to me, and did it very marginally, just kind of outpointed him on the feet, really didn't do any big damage, and then was doing really well against Maldonado in his last fight, taking him down, was really out-wrestling him and holding him down, but then just on the ground, I think in the third round, just getting reversed and immediately pounded out. I just thought it looked very bad for him, and I think Latifi's just going to have a huge advantage on the feet. Stringer's really tall, 6'3", I think. 6'2", but Latifi's 5'10", and he's going to have a size advantage, but I don't see him out wrestling Latifi. And Latifi I think is a solid kickboxer. Knocked out Chris Dempsey before his loss to Blachowicz. Submitted Diabate before that, and I think he's a decent kickboxer with power. I think that'll be more than enough to beat Stringer. So got to go with Latifi. Possibly a finish. Next up at lightweight, Michael Lebout versus newcomer Teemu Pakalin. A fight I just don't care about. Lebout, I know a lot of people. It seems like every prospect, every newcomer these days in the UFC, everyone's hyping them up to be something. But Lebout in his debut against Sergio Moraes, I didn't think he looked terrible, but at the same time didn't really do anything impressive or noteworthy. And Moraes looked like he was fighting at about 50%. Didn't use his wrestling or ground game at all. I think might have gone for one takedown, but fought the entire fight on the feet and was able to outpoint this guy. So I wasn't impressed, and newcomer Pakalin, so can't make a pick. Next up at flyweight, Patrick Holohan versus Von Lee. This is a fun fight, I think, and I actually thought Von Lee had been cut after his loss to Yuri Alcantara over a year ago. It was May of last year, and I'm excited to see him back because I actually think he's an underrated fighter, even though he's lost to a lot of guys. But Patrick Holohan, really dynamic guy, really unorthodox with his striking. A lot of footwork and dynamic movement. Good on the ground as well. A good kind of a good scrambler. Really uses his length and height well on the ground. Attacks with the submissions with the rear naked choke. Knocked down Sampo in his debut with an uppercut. Submitted him after that. But I think he really lacks the fundamentals that you need to really go further. Against Chris Calderwood, he was badly out scrambled every time they tied up and it went to the ground. He ended up on his back. Calderwood was able to scramble to top position, even though he's a much smaller guy, and on the feet, Calderwood had a real easy time closing the distance and boxing him from the inside. So Holahan doesn't have the tight boxing combinations. And even his last fight against Shane Howell really dominated him, was able to get him to the ground, nearly choked him out in the first round. So dominant, but ended up going the distance. So, I thought he should have been able to put that fight away. So I'm taking Von Lee here. I know it's been a long layoff, but Von Lee, he is a decent grappler. We've seen him submit Kid Yamamoto off of his back with an armbar very early in the first round in that fight. On his feet, he also uses a lot of footwork, bounces around, and I think he's going to be able to close the distance. You saw against Nam Phan, he just dominated him on the feet, outboxed him badly, and I think he has a hand speed advantage. He has the better boxing in close, and on the ground, he was submitted by TJ Dillashaw on the feet, a standing rear naked choke, and then he was also submitted by a Sun Sal, but those are two really elite grapplers, and I don't think Holahan is there with his grappling. So, and Vaughn also in his fight way back years ago against Chris Carriasos, he was able to get mount a few times in that fight, and looked okay on the ground. So I'm going to go with Von Lee here. A bit of a stretch just because of his layoff, and hasn't looked great at times, but I just think Holahan kind of lacks those sound fundamentals, and Lee will be able to exploit him there. So I'm taking Lee for a decision. All right, next up at lightweight, Stephen Ray versus Leonardo Mafra. I'm actually really excited to see Stevie Ray again because I really liked what we saw from him in his debut. Not just that he's a Scottish fighter, and I believe he was the first Scottish fighter ever in the UFC. But his game, we didn't see a whole lot from him, but just on the ground looked like a real physical guy, very strong, and was just able to completely shut down Marcin Bandel's submission game on the ground. And, granted, Bandel's seems to be a really low-level fighter, not cut out for the UFC. I think he lost to Mirabek Taisumov before that, got destroyed in the first round, but Ray looked really good on the ground. I thought just imposing his size and physicality, able to hold mount in top position, and then just worked his ground and pound pretty methodically until he got the finish. I really liked that. And I think he can do that to Leonardo Mafra here. I think Mafra is definitely more skilled everywhere, has a more well-rounded game, has a more diverse skill set, but he hasn't really beaten anyone any good. I mean, he was on Tough Brazil 2, was getting beaten down by Perpetuo in the finale, almost got finished, and was able to turn it around, got the finish there, got cut. Won 5 fights out of the UFC, no wins over name guys, and then fought Story in his return fight last summer. Looked okay on the feet early, but Story was able to get it to the ground pretty quickly, submit him, and then won a decision over Kane Carrizosa, where I don't remember the fight too well. I think he was pretty much dominated on the feet, walking him down, landing a lot more shots on him, and landing more shots than Carrizosa, but couldn't put him away. And Story was able to rough him up a bit on the feet, hang tough on the feet, get him down, and then from there, it was over. I think Ray, as physical as he is, will be able to get it to the ground, out wrestle him, be the stronger guy, and work him over on the ground. So I'm taking Ray. I don't know about Ray's stand up. Mafra might have the edge there. Interested to see more of that, but I think Ray, just being the bigger, more physical guy, will get the win here. And next up at welterweight, Leon Edwards versus Pavel Pawlak. Leon Edwards is a really good prospect. This is a guy to pay attention to, and I'm taking here to win big against Pawlak. Looked really good, I thought, against Claudio Enrique de Silva in his debut. Ended up losing the decision, got dragged down and held down for a little too long, but on the feet, especially in the first round, looked really good. Really light on his feet. Good footwork, is able to bounce around a lot, use movement, and really good hand speed. Long, rangy striker, but still has those tight combinations. And in his last fight against Seth Baczynski, just starched him in the first round, got a really quick knockout, and that was really impressive. So I'm taking Edwards to get a finish here. Pawlak, I'd written him off after his loss to Peter Sabata. That was a year ago, and it was just a pretty crappy fight. Pretty uneventful, and really couldn't offer much resistance to Sabata. But then his last fight against Sheldon Westcott, dominated him. Looked a lot more. He was definitely the more dominant fighter. I think Westcott, isn't a great barometer, but definitely dominated him. Beat him up and on the feet and pounded him out on the ground. But I don't think that's nearly enough to challenge Edwards here. I think Edwards is just gonna be way more technical and have a big hand speed advantage. And I think he's just a way more skilled striker. So I have to go with Edwards here to get an early finish. All right, next up, a women's strawweight fight, Joanne Calderwood versus Courtney Casey Sanchez. And Sanchez is a newcomer. This was supposed to be Calderwood versus Beck Rawlings, and I was actually going to take Rawlings because of how surprisingly bad Calderwood looked and lost her last fight to Marina Moroz. And that was a really bad loss, and from the people I heard predicting that fight, they were saying it was a complete mismatch. Calderwood was going to destroy her, and for her to just get run over like that, and not even like a one-punch knockout, but just getting outclassed, first on the feet, just getting driven back into the cage, and then Moroz, I think, pulled guard and submitted her from there. I thought that was a really bad performance for Calderwood. Maybe mentally she's not in the game. And, on tough, lost to Nama Yunus, was hanging in there on the feet, but I think, getting out struck kind of badly, and then once it hit the ground, got submitted with that arm bar, that Kimura from the back that Nama Yunus pulled off several times on the show. And then in the finale, I think she looked good against Siohei Ham, and was good in the clinch, was strong, fought kind of at a slow pace, but roughed her up in the clinch, looked good. But then the loss to Moroz was just really kind of eye-opening. So I don't know anything about Courtney Casey Sanchez here, but I'm not gonna make a pick. I would take Calderwood, just going off of her experience, but we have to reevaluate now big time after that loss to Moreau, so I don't know. But moving on, at lightweight, Joseph Duffy versus Yvonne George. Joseph Duffy, of course, looked great in his debut, and I'm not gonna discredit that performance, but I think people definitely got a little too excited. I mean, it was against Jake Lindsay, a guy who's done absolutely nothing in the UFC and had been finished in both of his 2 fights before that in pretty dominant fashion to other guys who aren't very good. John Tuck is, he's doing well, and the guys he lost to actually, not bad guys, but not guys at the, close to the top 15 yet. And Joseph Duffy just, did whatever he wanted to on the feet. Looked good, though, had really fluid striking, fluid combinations, good speed and pressure, was all over him. But Lindsay was basically defenseless. I think Duffy's definitely going to have a huge striking advantage on the feet here, and I think he can finish George. But George is one of these Brazilian, guys, these little fire hydrant guys, kind of short, stocky, well-muscled, that just wants to tie up with you and hold on. That's all he's done in all of his fights pretty much, kind of like a Bruno Santos guy. And other than that, really hasn't shown any kind of game, really no striking game, hasn't finished anyone. Even his debut against Keith Wisniewski, I actually thought he lost that fight, but just did the same thing, just try to tie up with him on the feet, lock up the waist. And I actually thought Wisniewski was able to, I thought he won the fight because he was, landing elbows from the clinch and doing more than him. Lost to Rodrigo Dam in a really slow-paced, typical Rodrigo Dam fight. Couldn't even strike with Dam. And then won his last fight against Josh Shockley. Was able to take him down, did a little bit more than we had seen from him previously. Almost finished with an arm triangle choke, but, wasn't able to put him away. And I think Duffy just, how good he looked on the feet, that's going to be enough to create separation and finish George here. But, I don't know how his grappling or wrestling game is. George, I think, is strong enough and, persistent enough with that, looking for the clinch and dragging people down that he might be able to steal a decision here against Duffy. But, Duffy does have a submission win over Conor McGregor, so he might be a capable grappler. But I am taking Duffy. I think he finishes George, maybe second round, but definitely need to see more of Duffy before before I buy him as a legit prospect. All right, next up, co-main event, lightweight Ross Pearson versus Evan Dunham. Not feeling great about this fight, just because I think we've seen with Ross Pearson, he's not improving drastically enough. He's just kind of been where he's always been. He's beaten some okay guys. He's had that knockout loss to Iaquinta, and now I think it's too late for him to really go anywhere. And earlier in his career, when he was younger and had the chance to really shoot up the ranks, never really capitalized on those opportunities. And Evan Dunham, just kind of a war horse, has a lot of tread on his tires at this point. Has been around for so long, but I think people always kind of underrate this guy. I was shocked when people were taking Rodrigo Dam to beat him in his last fight. I didn't see that at all, and he pretty much dominated Dam. And you look at his losses, I mean, Dunham is not a bad fighter who's lost to bad guys. His losses in the last couple of years, Edson Barboza, Cerrone, Rafael dos Anjos, which, by the way, that fight was extremely close and could have easily gone to Dunham. So he could have easily had a win over the current champion. TJ Grant, another extremely close fight, has a win over T-Bow. The guy's not a bad fighter. Is just kind of getting older, getting a step slower, has never really added new skills. kind of a limited striking game, but he's super aggressive, just bites down on his mouthpiece, comes forward, and really bangs it out. That fight against T.J. Grant, one of the most memorable stand-up wars for me ever since I've been watching MMA. So he's a solid fighter, but Ross Pearson, I think, will have the technical advantage on the feet. He's added power to his game, and that's really the only improvement he's made. I think he's a slower, more stationary fighter and a much more low-volume striker than he used to be. I don't know if that's age or just him changing his style. He used to be, a guy who would really come forward and throw a lot of volume, and now he's really looking for that big shot, and he knocked out Stout in his last fight. Finished Gray Maynard. I thought did well against Sanchez. Still has good head movement and good striking defense, but Iaquinta was just able to pressure him and just kind of walk through all his punches and ended up getting the knockout. So I'm going to take Pearson to win this. I think there's a chance Dunham is more active, more aggressive, throws more shots, but Pearson, I just think, will have the technical advantage, is more defensively sound with his boxing. And I think there's a chance Pearson catches Dunham and puts him away. I mean, we haven't really seen Dunham have a weak chin, but he has been finished by more talented guys, Barboza, Cerrone, and Pearson with his newfound power. I think he could catch him, but I expect Pearson to technically outbox him for a decision. So going with Pearson. All right, now the main event at middleweight, Michael Bisping versus Thales Leites. This is a real interesting fight, and this is, I think, the final test for Bisping in the sense that, if he beats Leites, then we know the only guys he can't beat are the top guys in that division. I mean, he's already lost to Rockhold handily. I think he'd get destroyed by Jacare, and Romero would destroy him. Those guys at the top. Although fight with Lyoto Machida now that he lost to Leites, that might be interesting. I still think Bisping would lose that fight. But Leites, I think, is that final guy, ahead of Dalloway, but also below the rest of those top guys. And I'm really kind of conflicted on this fight. Bisping's chin is going. Had that knockout loss to Henderson early in his career. But other than that, has never really showed a weak chin. I mean, I think Jorge Rivera dropped him early in that fight. But has always been a pretty durable guy, and you've seen his last couple of fights. Has suffered knockouts to Belfort. Was wobbled by Stan, but really his last fight against Dalloway, I think, was really evident. His chin is going. Was technically outstriking Dalloway for that entire fight. Had the more active, aggressive kickboxing game, more accurate with his strikes, but all it took from Dalloway was one kind of haymaker, and drop Bisping almost finished him at one point in that fight. And Thales Leites, really good ground game, although was able to dominate Tom Watson and Ed Herman on the ground, but didn't submit either of them, didn't even come close, and then found power in his hands, knocked out Trevor Smith and Francis Carmont, looked really good on the feet. And then against Tim Boetsch in his last fight, I actually thought, it wasn't such a good thing. It wasn't such a good look that he struggled with Boetsch early, and Boetsch was actually hurt him early on the feet, wobbled him at times, and it was kind of a back and forth brawl. And it was only when he was able to get Boetsch down to the ground and finish with the arm triangle that he looked like he was clearly in control. Before that, it was kind of a 50-50 fight with Boetsch, hurting him at times. So I think because of Bisping, just getting older, looks like he's getting a step slower. Still has, throws a good volume and accurate kickboxing. I think Leites does have the chance to put him out. Catching him on the feet, but the way he struggled against Boch makes me think that Bisping's technical advantage will really be enough to kind of stifle Leites here a bit, frustrate him a bit. Bisping's ground game, also his takedown defense, I think used to be better than what it is now. You look at the fight with Chael Sonnen, and then you look at the fight with Tim Kennedy, where he was just ragdolled, couldn't keep him off, and was taken down a lot in that fight. And Leites, with the ground game, I think would be able to, has a chance of, staying on top of Bisping. I don't know if he has the wrestling game, though. But I just think Bisping's volume, his willingness to trade and come forward, I think that's going to be enough here. But I would think there will be some scary moments where he's going to come very close to being finished, if not outright finished by Leites. I think he will get dropped, will eat some shots. I think Leites has that ability to stop him with one combination or one shot, whereas Bisping needs the fight to go the distance. And I think it's supposed to be 5 rounds, but I was looking on UFC Fantasy, and I think it was scheduled there as a 3-round fight. But if it's a 5-round fight and Bisping needs all 5 rounds, which he does to win the fight, I think that goes in Leites' favor. I'm going to take Bisping to win a decision, but I don't like his chin. And Leites has finishing ability, so I think it's pretty close. But I'll take Bisping for the decision. All right, guys, those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 72, Bisping versus Leites. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, comment, and subscribe. Again, follow me on Twitter, and stay tuned for my coming predictions. I'll have predictions out next for UFC on Fox, Dillashaw versus Barao 2. Thank you, guys. Take care, and bye.